guys, so welcome to my Tarot Through the Cards series. This is the first video of 78 that I will be doing. Of course, we're starting with the Fool card, and this is the traditional Rider-Waite. So the Fool is the first card of the Major Arcana. It represents the beginning of the Fool's journey, which is represented by the Majors, and this is almost always the first card in the deck, but sometimes it's the last card in the Major Arcana, and a deck might start with the Magician, or the Mage, I believe sometimes it's called, or the Mungus. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the Thoth Tarot, but like the Thoth Tarot, I do believe that the Magician comes first in the deck. But traditionally in the Rider-Waite, which is the traditional way of reading the cards, or it's the most common rather, the Fool comes first. Now, as you will see, the Fool is, well, it doesn't say it here, well, yes it does, is the 0 card. So the first card is actually the Magician, so the 0 would be like that first card. So what I'm going to do for this series is I am going to read from the meaning from the Druidcraft Tarot, which was the first deck I really stepped into. I had collected a lot of decks, but it was the first deck I really read without a book. And so I felt that that deck is an amazing beginner deck. If you're looking for a beginner deck and you don't really connect with the Rider-Waite, I highly recommend the Druidcraft Tarot, because the pictures, in my opinion, are extremely easy to read. Once you start understanding the meanings, it's really easy to pick up what each of those mean, and so I really love the Druidcraft. So the Fool. The message: trust in your inner knowing. Life is an adventure, a journey of discovery to be enjoyed. Keywords: innocence, freedom, potential, trust, play, openness, courage, optimism. The meaning: a journey of discovery, youthful optimism, a new beginning, confidence, faith, and courage as you face a new project or phase. Taking a risk, trying something new or unconventional. You can be serious about life, but enjoy it too. To gain wisdom, combine openness and optimism with awareness of your innate divinity, trusting in the ultimate goodness of life. And the reverse meaning, the keywords: foolishness, naivety, irrationality, gullibility. Reverse meaning: hold the Fool upside down and you see the Hanged Man. Freedom can become a limitation if not used wisely. Lack of direction, a fear of freedom, and feeling trapped by routine. Beware of being naive or gullible and getting out of your depth. Time to take on adult responsibilities and opportunity to explore your potential. So anyway, like you heard from the book, the Fool is about the beginning of a journey, stepping out. Now, what I've noticed from different cards, or decks rather, is sometimes the Fool is portrayed as being fearless and stepping out into the unknown, and it's a good thing. Other decks portray it as being a negative thing, like being like in the reverse, kind of like gullible, or, you know, not paying attention to the danger. Sometimes they say that the white little dog is warning his master of the cliff. Other times, you know, it's a companion. Now, the white, I believe, is representative of purity and innocence on some level. Obviously, there's the sun, which the sun represents in, you know, the sun card is, you know, happiness, joy, light. So I feel like in the traditional Rider-Waite, there's definitely an aspect of that this is okay. This, you know, stepping out, being brave, into the unknown. Of course, the idea is that the cliff is here. You know, he could fall to his death. We don't actually know, but he also might just step off and fly away. We're not really sure. He looks like he's kind of prepared, but not like a whole lot. So I really see the Fool as being, you know, very trusting almost of the experience, trusting of the unknown and stepping into it. Personally, I don't really super like the Fool card. Oftentimes I don't like how it's represented. I'm not really sure why. I oftentimes find the Fool to be rather unattractive. And I know that sounds like a really weird thing to say, but it, like, across the board, I just don't, I'm not drawn to that. Whereas, you know, the cards of the Devil or the Lovers I find to be very beautiful to look at. And I find the Fool almost, I don't know, I'm not sure why I have a resistance to it, but I do. Other people, I think, find the Fool very freeing. So that's just my personal experience. Other times the Fool is very cute, but oftentimes I just don't identify with it, and I don't usually like how it's portrayed, but that's just me. So that's the Rider-Waite. Now I wanted to take you through each, I have a bunch of decks here, so I hope you can see that. This is the Druidcraft. These cards are a lot bigger. So as you can see, very, very similar to the Rider-Waite. Let me see if I can get this so the shine's not in it. The Rider-Waite, it's almost exactly the same aside from the dog being black, but that's because I think the Druidcraft doesn't have as much lightness. It's much more earthy. So there's not a lot to say about this specifically. There is, you know, a very kind of vague look in his face, almost like he's unaware of this cliff. Whereas in the original one, it's very much looking up. He's kind of just like looking ahead. I don't think the dog is warning him here, but you know, that's my perception. But yeah, no, this is very similar to the traditional Rider-Waite. Now, the next card is from the Bonefire Tarot. And this is very different. The Fool is a woman, which I really like. Let me see if I can get her to stay here. There we go. The shine is really, there's a lot of shine in this card. So as you can see, this is very, very different. So in this one, the dog is pulling her back. So I sense that there is a warning here. She looks like she's almost ethereal. So I get the sense that she is, you know, taking this leap with a knowing that she will fly, whereas the dog is much more physical and a little more worried. So you might see this intuitively as, you know, trusting your intuition versus, you know, maybe trusting logic. Again, we have the sun here. There's some fire. Now with this deck, all of these symbols have meanings. And if you get this deck, all of this has a lot of symbolism, which I haven't really looked into this book as much. This is one of my favorite decks, and I love reading it. So I do see this, as you could see, maybe like an intuitive step forward instead of, you know, seeing the logic, you know, really just trusting the divine. Now I will say there is nudity in this video because we will be using the Marielle, which has nudity, so just heads up. Now, so this is the Fool for the Marielle Tarot, which, like I said, this deck is not Rider-Waite based. It's kind of its own system. And so, as you can see my reflection there. So this Fool, you know, there's no cliff. There's a lot of things that are very different with this, but he is stepping forward, and there's a freeness with his, you know, being nude. I don't really super connect with this mask. Maybe he's, maybe these butterflies are like, you know, flying off, like they're the mask and they're flying away, so there's a newness. But he's definitely moving forward. There's definitely a power within him, but I don't really identify this as much with being the Fool. So when I read this card, I either look to the book and see what it means, or I just read it as, you know, the typical Fool, but I don't feel like this represents a lot of that Fool energy in the same way the other decks do. Alright, so the next deck is the Tarot of Vampires. Now, this is a very, very dark deck, and like I said, honestly, I don't really identify with the Fool very often, and so oftentimes I'll just read it basically, but you can definitely see the symbolism here. Here's the white rose. Now, there's a bird here and not a dog. And this vampire, which I actually can't tell if it's male or female, the person feels male to me, but honestly it could be a woman as well. But they are stepping out of the coffin, and so that is really like, you know, stepping out into, well, not the light, but into the darkness, and, you know, stepping out, you know, beginning the day or night. So I see that. Now, there's a lot of blood here and all of that, and I haven't really super studied Phantasmagoria, which is the book that goes along with Tarot of Vampires, and so I know, knowing what I do know about the book, this I'm sure has tons of symbolism, and if I read it, I would understand why they have this as the Fool. But you know, it's really just like the coming out, the awakening, the beginning of the journey. So you can kind of see this, you know, the birds are flying up towards the light. I do see that, which is very interesting because vampires aren't usually in the light, so it's interesting. This might be moonlight, I'm not sure. But as you can see, this is a very different representation of the Fool, and that's pretty cool. So here we have the Fool card from Shadowscapes, and Shadowscapes is one of my favorite decks. As you can see, it's a very abstract version almost of the Fool. You have the fox here still, and you have the birds. I like this because it looks like the birds are actually going to lift her off and fly away. And she's standing at the very precipice, actually, of the monkey head, which you can see here, which you can see the monkey is being playful. So it brings in that playfulness here. But I see this as being very positive. She's looking out. She seems a little more conscious of what she's about to do, and it looks like the birds are actually going to take her off. So I see this Fool card as being very, very positive. And in the same sense, the fox here seems very chill about the whole experience. So again, I don't see that like warning aspect of this card. So you can see how different that is from the other cards I've shown before now. Alright, so this is from the Raven's Prophecy, and so as you can see, this card is very, very different from the other cards. I do like this Fool. In some ways it's represented by, I feel like, a younger person. There is a innocence to the character here. It looks like a girl to me. What I like about this is she could either be in a cave and stepping out, or this could be cosmic, and it could be really like stepping off into a soul journey, or the, you know, the experience. And then you've got the sun here, or moon, but this really looks like there's like infinite possibilities, you know, stepping out into the unknown, the cosmic, the world. You know, maybe she was born in this cave and she's stepping out for the first time. You know, there's a really cool aspect, but she's really embracing the world, embracing this experience, and I really like this aspect of the Fool. It's very empowered. You know, she's reaching out, and she's really, you know, taking on whatever comes. And I think this is a really cool, I think actually this is one of my more favorite representations of the Fool. I really, really like this. Alright, so this is from the Wild Unknown, and the Wild Unknown is very animal based, so this is the only Fool card where it's an animal. I love that it's a chick. I mean, like, anyone can see how the Fool card is perfectly represented by this chick stepping out. Now, you'll notice its wings aren't quite big enough to fly, and so I almost see this as maybe being a little more of like a, you know, maybe being foolish instead of it being, you know, like ready to take off into the journey. I think there's an aspect of danger with this one. But it also might just be testing the waters, you know, maybe it's not ready to fly, but it's like, oh, maybe I can, you know. So maybe this is, you know, timidly exploring, you know, what this energy is without really stepping into it. So whatever you feel intuitively with that. Now you can see there's buds here, which kind of represent the same energy, and this yellow is kind of like the sun. So you can see how with this card, it really does bring in those elements of the original Rider-Waite, but in a very new and kind of reimagined way. And I really, really love that. The Wild Unknown really is an amazing deck for stepping into the energies in a completely new sort of way, but really still holding true to that Rider-Waite system. Now, this next Fool card is from the Japri Tarot, which I wanted to add in here because it's very, very abstract. As you can see, there's tightrope here, and you've still got the dog, and this is a wheel, but I don't actually see a person. I feel like this is just the equipment. So it's very interesting that the dog's up here with the equipment, but you see the trapeze. There's an element of trusting the unknown. You know, you get up on that wire and you don't know if you're gonna fall or not, but you know, you trust yourself enough to get up there. This red balloon is very obvious to me right now, and so there's this element of lift. So, you know, this might be this idea of trusting, like, you know, before they said about the angels, you know, taking off and, you know, trusting that you will be held up. So I think that's really interesting. There's a lot of color here. It's very flamboyant. So it's really interesting. You could probably get a lot of intuitive hits off of this card, even though it's much more abstract. So that's a really cool way of seeing the Fool as well. You know, there's actually not a person here. It's more like just the energy of what could be if someone stepped out. Alright, so this next deck is, I believe it's the Tarot of Transformation. This is an Egyptian deck. Now you can see this is not 0, but it is 22. So in this deck is definitely a more traditional deck. And I wanted to add this in here because as we go through, this deck actually has pips instead of like all the minors drawn out. They look more like this. So this is a much more traditional deck in the sense of that. So the majors are drawn, but the pips are not. So I wanted to add this in for that alone. Now the Fool here is very interesting. It does have kind of a jester feel to it. So almost more of like a traditional like fool, which is interesting because when we think of like, oh, you're a fool, it means that you're ignorant. But if you think of the fools from, you know, the Renaissance or the Dark Ages, fools were very witty. Fools were very clever, and they understood how to make people laugh, and, you know, they could joke around without, you know, being beheaded. So I feel like this is almost more of a traditional sense of the fool, more of the trickster, someone who understands the game and understands the rules and knows how to bend them. And so I do see that as being an aspect of the Fool. Because to step out into the unknown, you have to kind of understand the game. You have to trust that the universe will carry you and that things will be okay. So I kind of like that with this card. And the final card I wanted to show you is from the Deviant Moon, which is a very unique deck. And this is kind of interesting. I do see this as being a little more foolish, a little more playful. This guy, I think, is stepping out in the moonlight, and he's, you know, playing in the water. He's very carefree, but he is being bitten, which I think is interesting. So maybe there's a little naivety within this card. You know, maybe he is being foolish. Maybe he shouldn't step out into the river. These are clearly some sort of piranha. And so maybe, you know, he didn't do his research. Maybe he got up in the middle of the night and said, you know, screw it, I'm just going to run around in the water, have some fun. And maybe he didn't think it out too well. So in this card, I would be more inclined to see it as maybe not so positive. So if I'm reading with this deck, especially with the Deviant Moon, I often use this deck for shadow work. So oftentimes, you know, the cards will come up in maybe a little bit more of a negative sense than more of a positive sense. So I feel like the Fool really isn't aligned with that. And so, you know, when you're looking at shadow work, you're looking at what you want to work on. And so maybe this is an aspect of the Fool that needs to come up more clearly instead of it coming up in reverse. This is the meaning that comes up just on its own. You know, like it's the slightly less positive sense of the Fool. So anyway, those are the decks I have. I might switch them up, you know, as we go through, like I said. But that is the Fool card. If you have any intuition on, you know, of the Fool, let me know. Comment down below if you have any questions. Like I said, I mentioned all the names of the decks, so if you're interested in any of these decks, definitely go look into them. They're all very different and beautiful. But yeah, if you have any questions about the decks or anything like that, please comment down below. Hope you enjoyed this video, and the next card coming up will be the Magician. Alright, you guys, have a lovely day, many blessings, namaste, and don't forget, it's all about the soul journey. Mwah.